Hi there, everybody. My name is Kate, and welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. So, this is kind of an off-the-cuff, all of a sudden download that I'm getting. That it's fairly time-specific because this is the current time. A lot of stuff is going on. However, it is relevant for any time whenever there's a lot of chaos and a lot of destructive tower-type energy that's moving rapidly around us at any time. However, right now we're in the midst of approaching our equinox, an eclipse, and the three-eye atlas approaching, and just a lot of energy sources cosmologically and planetary alignment, etc. That for people who are super sensitive to the energies, light workers and star seeds, etc., or even people that don't know or wouldn't identify as that. There's a lot of people being tweaked, with all of these surges. There's been a lot of high power solar activity. It's at solar maximum right now. The sun is at solar maximum, and it is burping out and spitting out all kinds of stuff routinely that is just fascinating. However, it also can be devastating feeling to the nervous system. And for starseeds and light workers, or people who identify as those that are activating a light body, this can feel pretty gross and pretty upsetting. I know myself, just a few minutes ago I was lying in bed going, what the after just a regular day. Nothing bad necessarily. It just feels like my nervous system is kind of boiling from the inside, or peeling off, or peeling out, or doing stuff. And the logical mind is what really bites down on that and has a hard time with the taste. Like, what the hell is this? Because the old logic of the old paradigm, none of this makes sense. I wouldn't, in my old paradigm and old understanding of old earth and old me, I would have never and didn't put together any kind of activity outside of my body having influence on something inside my body, other than the normal, the food I eat, the air I breathe, etc. However, now, because I live more of a hermit lifestyle and am very sensitive, and have moved away from anything that would really be influencing too much externally, that I can manage and can have control over, I clean that up considerably, and I just don't hang out with people. I don't do things external to me unless I know very personally that I am driven from within me, within the higher mind of me, within the most guided place in me. I don't do anything unless I know that is for me to do, especially during high energy pushes. And the logic of me of the old would say, what's wrong with you? You should. Based on the fact that it wasn't that long of a day. It's not like you did a lot. I worked. However, in my old life, 10 years ago or so, 15 years ago, I would have had a million different reasons and felt very bad about myself, with shame and guilt, etc., for why it wouldn't be possible to feel like I'm just, kind of frying from the inside. And it does help some to pull forward into 2025 and understand myself differently as a light worker, healer, etc., that I can understand in the new logic. However, the old logic still has to bridge from old earth to new earth, is that bridging space. And we're in some pretty intense corridors of bridging, the heaven and earth experience, if you will, or the 3D moving into 5D consciousness, higher consciousness rising. However you see that, to me, it's just one big giant story that's spit out through, one big giant movement that's spit out through millions of different stories, and every single person on the planet is going to have their perspective and their experience of that story. However, the closer we get to people who are more aligned to us and more energetically aligned to us, we tend to have stories that make more sense to all of us in that collective of people. And so, though my worst day, so far in the last couple of weeks, this has been one that's pretty tough, just feeling very out of sorts, and, having some visual, like literally can't focus my eyes and stuff. My cats are acting kind of weird. My dog wouldn't go outside this morning. He's pulling on the leash like he doesn't need to go potty. Like, seriously, what is this? And excuse me, I have a client on the spectrum that I work with. I'm his mentor, and we were speaking today, and it was like we were in separate lands. Like, what are you saying? And he was giving me the same look, like, what? As if we were communicating two separate conversations, or that what each one of us had said midstream was coming from, a different person in a different time and place, and it was a whole separate language or something. I mean, it's been kind of hiccupy and weird like that. And in my old logic, that would be tending to get into the blame and stuff of, God, I wonder what's wrong with me. Why didn't I say that better? Why didn't I this? Why didn't I that? And even though, pulling forward and being, a healer and intuitive and empath, etc., even though pulling into that and really honing those skills, quite a bit over the years since I left the older lifestyle. My old body physically left places. However, the energetic body has to activate. The light body has to activate, and any kind of seeds within us or ancient wisdom, etc., that would be within us that's activating. It has to activate in a sequence and in a controlled manner is what I ask for. I don't activate that stuff, willy-nilly in me. I don't go in calling for, activation of everything in me unless I want to find out that that's not a very controlled way to do that. I allow my body to naturally respond to what's happening, and I also ask my guides and the ancient wisdom that would be activating in the DNA, etc., moving through whatever the crystalline understanding is that you might have. I don't get into a lot of detail with it myself. I allow my team, I trust them that, look, whatever is happening here and whatever is going on, I do know that many of us are feeling that ancient wisdom being awakened in us from, many lifetimes ago, many aeons ago, many whatever you think it is ago, that is coming online, and it's going to feel kind of weird, and so I do trust my team, even if I can't trust myself, and my mind is just busy like a rabbit, running around scared, or a mouse. It just feels like it's stuck, in a maze. This isn't a maze, and it's not meant to be a punishment or some sadistic universal game or something like that. It's a matter that old logic goes with old world, and so what would make sense in the old world, what would feel like, the natural thing to say for why I might not be able to see 2020 when I had 2020 surgery in 2020, what the hell, that I'm having, cross eyes and stuff, that this isn't me. And yet old logic would isolate that to this event, and get all terrorized by it, which, it still does briefly. Go, oh my God, maybe I'm going blind. The old me of, catastrophizing and, oh shit, what's going to happen? What if the old me would do that very, very much, very, very easily, and just panic ridiculously. And if I allow myself to fall into that pattern and stay there, it would allow me to really be freaked out. However, I had to stop and tell myself today when it was happening, that is this something, a pattern you've seen before, that, oh yes, of course, this does happen during alignments, it does happen during upgrades, it does happen during activations, and this is a huge, huge period of time for humanity and Earth, in her own cosmology and in her own ascension into 5D, and changing her frequency as well. So as I'm, able to stop and not isolate every single thing that's happening, every weird, glitch in my body or twitch, in my soul somewhere, to not isolate them, land on them and go, oh my God, it's not an easy task. I'm not suggesting it is. However, it does help me to be able to stay more present with that weird, I'm in a liminal space here where I'm not here, I'm not there, and, it just feels weird. To be able to sit in that with some amount of clarity and some amount of higher mind, much more than the old me, whatever the old me is that would be questioning it. I don't get into interviewing a whole lot of anything when this kind of thing is going on. I don't go into interview mode because I'm not in research data mode as an alien ET or, starseed or anything else. I'm a human being that's going, excuse me, what the fuck is this? This feels really, really weird to me, especially when I might be having sensations that I could tie to historically or medicinally or something, that, oh no, maybe something's wrong with my heart, maybe I'm going blind, oh no, things that seem like they can be explained through the old paradigm, and they could be, they can be. However, do I want to land a whole lot by giving gas to anything that's going to explain to me what was the old me in the old paradigm? Or would it be better to pull my attention and my energy off of that and start noticing, the patterning? It's not an easy process. However, it is one that we do have control over, we do have management of, and we're the only ones that do. So even though, we've all heard, all the advice and all of the teachings of how to work our own mind, and maybe we, do that some of the time, it really is about shifting the perception, being able to stand in the face of that which, just scares the shit right out of us, or annoys us, or whatever takes us off kilter and out of balance, whatever that is, to be able to sit in the face of that. And then if we're going to interview, start interviewing that, start asking, what is it that I need to know and understand out of here and out of this situation, what I'm experiencing? What is it that I need to know? What part of me is feeling so freaked out that it doesn't understand what's happening here? Because if I fundamentally believe that I have a guide within me and that I have external team of guides external to me, hopefully I experience my life that way. Probably not listening if you don't, but that's how I operate in my world, is that I do understand I have a higher self. I have many of them, and I have higher guidance of just me and all the many fractals of me that are, a higher ascended consciousness than me. And with me comes a whole team of ascended masters, etc., that are designated just for me, and that is true for everyone else as well. It's just that if we get shortchanged and stopped with believing that the gatekeeper here of the mind, which is super challenged sometimes, especially now, if we get gatekept right there, we're going to forget quite easily. And the more wounded parts of us can really tear that down instantly with believing that we ourselves have to find the solution because it's a human experience we're having. It's a physical something, and how am I going to do this? What if I need, should I take some Tylenol? And, I wonder, what should I do? And then that turns into the whole spiral downwards of a lot of 3D thinking. The way for me that I've found that works best, not necessarily easily, I'm not suggesting that, the way that works best for me is to really start that inquiry and say, what is it that I can learn from here, and how can I really allow myself to sit in the liminal space and that weird space of, I'm not really sure what this is. And remember, have I stood here before? Well, yeah, but, and really eliminate that conversation of yeah, buts are not allowed. That's a whole syndrome. That's a programming thing. If I start hearing myself say, yeah, but, whoa, hold on a second. This is yes. Leave it at that. We'll hear the disgruntlement in a moment. Everyone gets a chance to speak. However, it can't turn into that whole, yeah, but with the argument. Just answer the question, yes and no there, Kate. Internal me, have we seen this pattern before? Yes. Okay. When has it felt weird like this? When have we felt nauseous and, feeling kind of heavy and having the weird double vision, crossed eyes, and having a pressure and ears that are just kind of not ringing exactly, however, just feeling weird? When has communication, been bizarre, that it seems like, are we even in the same language? Are you seeing me? Is the mic on? What is this? Has this happened before? And when I can say yes and track that back, it keeps my mind busy with a cerebral thing that if the mind is going to have an activity, I want that activity working right on in my highest favor to understand the patterning. For me personally, I know this is not true for everyone. However, it's true for quite a number of people, because humans are logical people who just are seeking danger, not danger, danger, not danger. That for me, finding the logic in it helps keep my mind busy with the logic that is necessary for me. The actual illogical thing for me to do would be chasing down a whole lot of symptoms that I think are happening and that I am, physically experiencing in my 3D body. However, if I start to try to chase those down and explain them in the 3D paradigm of the old, then I'm really going to spend a lot of time spinning. In my experience, I've spent a lot of time spinning and going, oh no, I wonder if, what if that's, and instead of really allowing that to happen, because that was my specific patterning, was to catastrophize and go, oh no, what if, and spend a lot of time, even, coming through the spiritual understanding. If I really spend that a lot of time there, then I'm really giving my mind opportunity to lock down at high power time, when I want you to unlock I want you to unlock a whole lot and not get fortified in these big high energy pushes. It's not that it's going to stop me from doing what ultimately I came here to do. It's just that it can make it much more difficult to push through these periods where it's just funky. It feels weird. It feels unsettling. A lot of old stuff can come up, emotional stuff, and so physical symptoms, emotional, crying, laughing, just extremes that if I put any of those, what would be signs and symptoms through a chart, it's going to come up with a diagnosis of here somewhere, more than likely on the DSM of you some sort of cuckoo kind of thing. And I'm not making fun of that. I had diagnoses there because I wasn't understanding a whole lot of what I'm talking about right now. And so if I give too much gas to any of the mind stuff that's in the old paradigm, we still need our mind. We can't, it's not going to go well for me to just dismiss it, because we need our mind. Our mind is the operating system for our energy to come through. If we didn't have a mind of some kind, how would we express who and what we are if we didn't have the ego to, be a gatekeeper, one of the gatekeepers with the mind? Then how would we be expressing our energy? We need something to put our personality through and create archetypes. However, the new archetypes of the ascended consciousness, 5D, New Earth, etc., are not going to be the same as the old archetypes. We're going to need to really be representing for ourselves and to ourselves a lot of strength in understanding that we're here building the new archetypes. We're here, those of us that are here doing light work and starseed work, etc., and have missions very dedicated to this process. We're here to be creating the prototypes and the blueprint for people, if they care to see the newer archetypes, that we're moving away from the old 3D, then those old patterns of domination, Age of Pisces stuff, ego-driven, me driven, those really are, how are we going to be building a new identity or expressing the identity that's activating within us if we try to shove it through stuff that somebody already wrote? We have to be prepared to rewrite it in our own mind, because it already is being rewritten. We wouldn't be waking up to these superpowers, the X-Men stuff. We would not be waking up to that. We would not be realizing that, and we wouldn't be holding these high-level experiences and conversations astrally and with, community wherever we're finding it, if we're lucky to be finding it. We wouldn't be having those just by coinkydink. That's where we can allow our logic of what happened in the 3D to make sense to us, that statistically speaking, we can't have these experiences of synchronicity as often as we're having them. And it seems, just so difficult sometimes to say, well, that just seems so random. And yet the laws of statistics would tell me that it's not random, that the last time I had a visual disturbance like I'm having today, or that I've had today, was in another energy surge that happened to be involving my physical body, which makes my nervous system twitch out a bit. It makes, the conversations get weird. There's a whole set of things that are very specific to me. And if I were to rely on even somebody from the lightwork community or the new human being community, the spiritual community, to define how that experience would be by a list of symptoms, etc., I might get stuck, and I did. When I would do that, it's far more important and crucial in my experience, in my opinion, and in the downloads that I get, to be prepared, Kate, that you need to write your own, what your list of symptoms are, the things that you can go back and see for that new logic mind to be built, to understand your own self and how this stuff applies to you, instead of how it applies to the collective. Collectives are breaking apart everywhere, and we bring in the unity and the unification of humanity into collaboration, etc., by first separating out and grouping up those tribes that are really best suited for the work that they do together, and it's pulling old systems apart. It's even pulling, communities that seem like they gathered really well for a while, very loving communities. We gathered very well there together, and now it's time to go and separate and find those, that are more in the echelon of whatever it is that we're doing. Things are rapidly moving, and so finding the logic of understanding the symptomology or the signs that we think we're seeing or feeling, writing them down and finding the courage to move through that mind program of the old paradigm, the new program of the new earth paradigm, and the new earth understanding is that I need to be very clear and very courageous in understanding that the things that are affecting me, they need to be mine, and I need to be okay with owning them and knowing that they are mine. And it doesn't matter if, this person over here has their opinion. We have a lot of very strong-minded people, across the globe, whether they're awakened or not, whether they're intuitive or not, or think they are, and whether they're, somebody who puts a label of expertise on themselves or not. I know that I'm an expert, absolutely 100% of me. If I can say that, if I'm just blindly out there, I'm probably not asking the question. But if I know that I've spent the last 7 years of my life in direct inquiry with my soul and with my team, and spending a lot of time in deep reflection and lucid dreaming, etc., and have made it my absolute passion to come through and speak, daily, all the time, staying in that meditative state, living my life as a meditative state. If I know that I've done that, which I have, then it's really, going to be unkind of me and end up with a discrepancy that will keep me in that liminal space with me and me, wondering what's wrong. If I'm questioning what I already know, this is the path I've chosen, it's the path I'm on, and what kind of cruelty of the cosmos, my team, me, what kind of jerk in space would I be if I was up somewhere designing a life for me, a life mission for me that included the cosmic joke of, haha, it really wasn't true. This is hilarious, because I cannot hold in one side of my mouth that I believe that it's true. I have all of these things, and in the other, just because I'm doubting, say, well, it just doesn't seem to make sense. Well, no, in the old paradigm, none of this is going to make sense because we're writing the new what makes sense. And I can assure you, in my world, nothing, about my spiritual journey looks the same, tastes the same, smells the same, nothing, not even close. And I've had to really blow out my own brain's capacity, my mind's capacity to say, yeah, no, I know that seems weird that tree would be talking to you, but baby, it is, instead of arguing with it, sit down and have a little chat with it instead. I know it seems weird that, you think you're seeing colors, and you are, while you're in the middle of your dental exam, you're seeing stuff happening with your eyes closed. Oh, that must just be the reflection of the light. Really? How many times have you been to the dentist in your life? Has that ever happened before? Having those questions of, rather than take the doubt or take the but that's happening in my mind, rather than take that and let that maul me down, start inquiry there with, is this something that I've seen before, and how could it be possible? If I'm going to challenge one side of my, experience, whether I'm going to dip into the old or, surrender to the new, if I'm going to challenge one side of those, doubt would be the side that would say it couldn't possibly be that. That's ridiculous. How about I check out the other side of that polarity and say, how is it that I might be right in this? How is it that I could be absolutely right on target, and this is just part of the journey? How is it that I can answer the question from that perspective rather than trying to dig my way out of that perspective? It is very easy to fall into doubt, especially at times when we are being pushed. I mean, rammed, jammed, and pushed and squished through these portals, these gateways, these expressions, these whatever you call them, these surges. How is it we could possibly get pushed through that or squished through that and not have doubt? Well, it isn't that the doubt would come. It isn't that rain would come, It's that we are prepared for rain. We're prepared for doubt in the times whenever doubt isn't completely consuming us. Now that's, doesn't really seem to be able to help a whole lot if we're in the midst of doubt and we don't really have much of a practice in place. However, I'm going to encourage you no matter what part of that you might be in, that even despite the fact that I have a very good practice of staying very, much in the let me inquire about how I could possibly be right about this, how I could be correct about this, instead of just dipping into always staying in the, I must be wrong. You do have to be far enough along to believe that there's a possibility you don't have to be. And if you're willing to believe that you are not wrong, bad, dirty, naughty, all those old shame messages, if you're willing to believe that that isn't you, then it is possible you're halfway through the battle right there. And then it just becomes the persistence of getting a hold of that mind, and use that to your advantage. The mind is a very powerful thing, the most powerful thing we have, because it's the gatekeeper to the energy that we have to shoot it through this thing. Then, let's open it up and unlock it. And if it's the gatekeeper, then why do I want to give, a negative or unpleasant experience of that was the old paradigm? That's an old operating system. It went with the old phone, it went with the old device, and I'm getting a new device. I can feel it in my body. Then how about I need to have a new operating system that's going to be updating me in my new device of me, the light body, etc. And that during that transition phase, this is when the update would be happening, and the little thingy would be spinning if we were watching our computer. And during that spinning time is that liminal space where we feel kind of weird. We're not here, we're not there. However, the mind is being updated. And if the more that we allow that to just go with the process, people hear it, we hear it all the time, and it's go with the flow. Well, how do I do that if I feel terrorized, if I feel sick to my stomach, if I'm very highly concerned that physical symptom or sign would be something that, oh gosh, what's wrong with me? My way of dealing with that personally, like I said, is to start tying it back to when's the last time I experienced this? What is going on? And I've written things down that builds that understanding for me, not looking at what somebody else that's an expert. They're not an expert of me. They're an expert of spiritual information. They're a master of spiritual information, perhaps. However, we're in the age of Aquarius, where spiritual autonomy and spiritual discernment are very, very, very important, and spiritual freedom and sovereignty is hugely important. It's the name of the game, because we as independent souls who are no longer codependently enmeshed with other people and bungled up in all these energy bundles everywhere, when we pull out and we get aligned with us as our own corridor of light, then we align with all the other corridors of light. We cannot be a unified consciousness or a consciousness of one if we're all one snarled mess. If that worked, we would be staying where we are now. However, when we ungank that and we get into understanding I'm in alignment with me, with the corridor of light within me that I answer here to my divinity, that allows me to stand in the presence with others who are equally aligned with themselves, and we are standing in the same bandwidth. However, we're not battling one another, we're not battling ourselves, we're not battling, the flow. We are the flow. And those of us that are here to kind of teach that, show that, and be that, we're prototypes that, we're setting an example. We're showing people that, it's probably best if you don't follow, what happened to me, because, and call that similar or the same, because if there's a difference in my experience that you're having something that I am not, then if we get, into a discussion about which one is right and wrong, we're already wasting our time instead of just being back in line with, you are having your experience, and wow, let me support you, if I can, while you're having that experience, and you support me while I'm having that experience where I might be feeling doubt. However, comparative shopping is no longer really valid or helpful if we're truly going to stand up and say, yeah, I'm here to show a new way, 28, and by showing a new way means that I allow other people to show me their way. However, it doesn't mean their way is better or worse. It doesn't mean mine is better or worse. It means that we have our way, and if we're forward facing, and moving in light and divinity and moving very righteously, we're all moving in a formation, and it's the bandwidth of the energy, not the clump, and the unified field and the law of one, isn't just one big of heaped up, entangled, and codependent, messy toxicity. It's bandwidths of energy that are purely allowing that to come into the stream of consciousness within each of us, and that brings us together in that unified field, as it's been shown to me. And however other people express it, it's their story of that, if that's what they're feeling. And I find that, getting out of the mind boggle of what's right, what's wrong. What is right is, for me, this is breaking the brain, and hacking the mind, the operating system of old, is to what is right and wrong. There is no such thing as wrong. There is only what is correct, because everything that is here for me is here for me. Everything that's happened is used for good, period, whether it went as a contract was supposed to or not. That's the lens I'm talking about, right now, the perceptive lens that I'm talking about, looking at the energetic field I'm talking about looking at. Sometimes we need to look at things a little more, grungy and earthbound, to clear some stuff. However, during a high pressure time is not going to be when I'm doing that inventory. It's too easy to slip back into old patterning. And so if I can look at that, that information as everything is working for my good, it always is. How may I see this as this is good for me, and how may I surrender to this, even if it feels really creepy to me? And it's so logical to think, well, thank you for this, upset stomach and the fact that I just want to hurl a little bit a lot, and thank you. I'm not going to say I sit around saying thank you. I sit around saying, I understand my body's going through upgrades. I understand, when I'm in hungry hippo mode, or when I'm not eating for the next 4 days, and allow that to be the norm for me, because it has to be. My body needs the fluidity, it needs the space, and it needs the grace to have her own existence outside of the mind, outside of me, outside of any personality or fractal part or energy part. My body has her own personality, and she needs to have the space without the shame being brought in of what's wrong with me. My body would probably say, there's nothing wrong with me, baby. Could you just lie down and stop talking so loud, and let me do what I need to do? And so challenging the mind system, the old mindset system, and allowing the new mind system, the new operating system of New Earth understanding, is upgrading constantly if that's what we're doing. But we can slow ourselves down in comparative study. We can slow ourselves down 3131 in believing that we're not doing it right. And it can be difficult. However, New Earth leaders have to be leaders who are willing to, poke through the veil and just keep on running, and understand that we're opening up corridors of light, all over the place, and we're activating land, we're activating, animals, we're activating within people if that's what we're doing, and they're activating with us, that constantly, and that it's always for good. Even though there's a lot of stuff on the planet that is not looking very good, and looks like, oh no, terrible stuff, there are very, very tragic things that are happening. However, it is all for the betterment of humanity overall, and it is all for the global unity eventually. And there is never going to be, a destruction. No, what is the word? A demolition. I don't know what the word would be. And there's no way that a demolition of an old system can go down without there being a lot of collateral damage. And, getting into persecution of how and why is an old mind game. And during high pressure time is not the time to do an inventory of my mind about all the butthurt I've had in the past. It just isn't. And so that's a way that I gatekeep that too, is to say, no, thank you. No, thank you. Get up and move around the room, which is why I got up and started making this video that, no, you're starting to go down, a little rabbit hole there, and that's not one. No, you're not allowed. But those are things that are reinforced by consistent behavior, consistent discipline, the tiniest microscopic step that I have to take and make in order to say, okay, get up. I started by just turning over, changing my position, shifting, turning some music on, and it wasn't enough. Then, okay, then it is tiring and it's exhausting, sure, sometimes. However, get up and move around the room some more then, and get kind of drill sergeant with myself in my mind, because it's the mind that's trying to tell me that this is something that we want to think about. No, it's not. I don't want to think about anything of the past right now. Not now, not when I'm feeling vulnerable, because that would be the trap of the old system, that I'll go ahead and just start feeling really terrible about myself. I'll just go ahead and start, opening up wounds that really aren't there, or stabbing my own little inner self, all those inner children, start letting them feel really abandoned and, bad about themselves and stuff. That no. We've done too much work. There needs to be a way to gatekeep that at a time whenever that would be possibly really pounded, and the sensitive spots that are already feeling kind of inflamed and sensitive because it's high energy stuff, that's not the time to allow those conversations to go sideways in my own mind. And there is no one, absolutely no one, that can control that or manage that except us. However, if we are being, poor gatekeepers of our own mind, people out here can seem like they're managing us all the time. They can make a, comment out of the side of their neck that just, what, or they can look at us funny because we're feeling super sensitive. And, there's no shame in honoring the fact that we feel super sensitive. It's just that when I'm feeling super sensitive is not the time that, if I'm not going to let somebody outside of me say some dumb shit to me, then I absolutely cannot allow that to happen internally, because that's not a practice that will go well anytime. However, especially at a time when my nervous system and my body is busily activating new information, and we have to be dumping out old information, and understand that, as it's emptying the trash, in my operating system, as it's getting rid of the old stuff, the old, anti-malware or whatever that stuff is, the system that's taking out the viruses, we might be subject to feel some of that toxicity leaving and the off-gassing. We might hear the fart as it leaves the body, and it's okay just being able to Buddha that, observe that if necessary. And if I don't have to observe it, if I just go, oh, okay, that feels weird, and be okay with the weirdness of just saying, oh, that feels weird, twitching, and going on with my day, and then making a shift, making a change at whatever level it takes to get up and move around, change your mind about that, say no thank you, whatever it is, tapping, whatever we have to do. Keep searching, despite the need for extreme perseverance. Sometimes it's those battles, if you will, it's those moments of extreme perseverance where we gain the most strength and we find the most fortitude. So anyway, this is far longer than I intended it to be. I wasn't even sure what it was going to be. However, it's definitely helping me as I'm hearing it come in, because it has been quite a challenge, over the last few days specifically. But it's not like it hasn't been hugely hella challenging for me, in the past as well. I'm a human being, as well as being multidimensional and all of that. Sure, okay, I own that 3636. However, if I just try to ignore and go over and bypass that human being thing, I will not be helping to serve the crystalline body that could be activating in me far better if I wasn't slowing the download time, if I wasn't slowing it down by saying, pause that for a moment while I get busy trying to save parts of this old operating system. No, Kate, you have to let go of all of it, and best if you not try to interview it. There's no need. You've already decided, because you're in the upgrade, you already pressed the accept the operating system upgrade. Then let that install and do whatever it needs to do to make that happen, even if it feels a little creepy, a lot of creepy and a lot of weird as it's coming through. How is New Earth going to come in into you and through you in your experience of the new light body? How's that going to come to you if it doesn't feel brand new? And brand new, it's like getting a new pair of shoes. Feels kind of tight and weird, and like, I'm not sure how that feels. That's 3737. That's how it is. Sometimes that everything in light work and spirituality and, activations don't always feel pleasant and fun. However, just because something doesn't feel pleasant, and it might even be kind of painful, or even hugely painful, it doesn't mean that we aren't breaking out of the cocoon and just, experiencing the birth process as we're going through the canal. That shit hurts sometimes, and it still is very, very, very much so that we're birthing into a whole new experience when we're done with it. And it just helps immensely to our own mind and to those tattered parts of us that just feel so beat up sometimes, to not hammer down on that and go, God, I wonder what's going on here. Get a hold of that sucker. It's ruthless. That's a mind thing, and it's not you. That's old programming, old understanding of old earth that would try to define you as something less than a divine being, a cosmic being, a multi-dimensional being who's cramming that all through a human experience, which is way denser than the energy that is available and that we're quite frequently channeling and experiencing in these activations. So, as I said, good luck with that. Take care of yourself. Know you are deeply and richly loved, despite all of the icky feelings that might be coming, despite all the sideways comments, besides, people looking funny. And, try not to take things personally. Do not take them personally, if at all possible, everywhere that you can let it go. It's a mind thing. It grows that muscle, and every one of those micro steps will get you, I found, have gotten me further. Those micro steps of catching them every single time and being very diligent in it, they've gotten me further in building my spiritual muscles than if I were to do, a guided meditation for myself 3 times a week or even 3 times a day. Like, no, every 3 seconds, if you need to change your mind about that and be speaking to your mind and, visualizing, etc., and really getting a hold of that. It's a full-time job, for me, whenever, especially when I'm in this time like this where I could be just feeling really bad about myself and very ashamed, etc. It's not a good time for that. You don't want to be anchoring that in. Nothing to be afraid of, friend. However, if you can at least observe it, know it, and understand that that's what's happening, then do something about that. Don't get stuck in the, but nope, keep going. There's more. You're here to rewrite that script. We're in improv theater now. We're not in the old script of the old earth. We're in improv theater now. Rewrite that shit and get busy. So anyway, I hope that you enjoy your day, no matter what part of the day you're in, and to remember to get within your skin because you're divine. It's upgrading. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's lovely, and it's painful sometimes, and it's okay. It is still divine. Everything is divine, despite what you see exploding around, on the earth, and it's happening. It is happening. It is divine. There is no ugliness that we can find that would not be moving into line somehow. And the more that we keep our eye off of that stuff that would distract us from remembering that we are here on divine missions, we are here in divine bodies, the more that we pay attention here and really, keep our eye on our paper, the less we worry about, getting into the, oh my goodness, what about this, what about that? And the more we're actually helping the consciousness of the planet to maintain, because the people that are not even in this conversation don't even have any idea and have no clue whatsoever. They're going to be the ones that they can take over the job of being super bothered and super chaotic. They need stable forces like us to stand in those columns of light and say, we hold this consciousness, we understand this consciousness, even though it wigs us the shit out. Sometimes we know more, we see more, we're more mature in this, then let us be more mature in this and hold that vision and understand that whatever our vision is that's greater than this, it is all for good, and I'm here to show that that is true. So good luck with every step of it for you, and take care of yourself, and remember to get within your skin, because that divine, no matter how freaky it feels, it's absolutely gorgeous and totally fine. Take care of your beautiful selves, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye, beautiful friends. Mwah.